My name's Chris Brown. I'm editor of Polaroids and Polar Bears, which is a cultural website. Started off in Birmingham, but it's sort of increased its reach now across the West Midlands. Sort of a what's on guide for the region. We recently launched a professionals arm to the site as well, which some of this I'm going to talk about is going to feed into. So Polaroids and Polar Bears is, I guess, a hobby of mine. By day, I work for a company called Barks PR. It's a PR agency based in the Jewellery Quarter. Right, so today I'm going to talk about art analytics and audiences. I'm going to start off with asking a question. How many of you analyse your social media, your web, or anything like that? How many people analyse the reach of their content? Cool, which is great. So what I'm going to talk about today is some tips that hopefully some tips that you may not know. Some of it you may know, but it's more about engagement. I think that's really important. When you're talking to your audiences, it's always about building that conversation and making sure that your content is reaching the right people. You may not want to reach 1 million people with your latest blog post or your tweet. You want to reach people that are going to visit your venue, attend your exhibition, buy your tickets. So actually you may only want to reach 50 people, 50 core people. So it's all about how we can measure that, and in turn that will tailor the content as well. So I'm going to pose a question first. Why do you want to engage with your audiences? This is open to the floor, so why do you want to engage with the people that you talk to? Why are you tweeting? Why are you blogging? Why are you updating your website? Why are you doing it? So these obviously aren't all of them. But next I want to talk about what does engagement look like. So reasons for engagement. These again only a couple of reasons. You might want to sell tickets. You want to raise awareness of events, of exhibitions, you want feedback, as we discussed, and you want to further your brand reach as well. So before you set out your metrics, you need to identify the reasons why you actually want to engage with people. But what does that engagement look like? Again, this can vary completely between the type of organisation that you are and the results that you want as well. So in terms of social media terms, it could be comments, retweets, links or shares. If you're an actual venue or a theatre, for example, or somewhere you've got to purchase tickets, it could be that engagement looks like ticket purchasing or content creation as well. Now, engagement and success are two very different things. So your engagement is how people engage with your brand, but the success is sort of that end result. If people have engaged with you, how do you know that's good engagement? How do you know that's bad engagement? You know, obviously if someone's giving you bad feedback, that's still an element of engagement. It may be negative, but then you can tailor what you're doing as well. So what does success look like? Ticket sales, for example, visitors to your door, and engagement with social media channels as well. So it's incredibly important that you evaluate your engagement. Social media is just one factor, but it should always be evaluated. You need to know why you're doing it and why you're measuring it as well. Goals should be set at the start of any campaign and reviewed regularly. Are you meeting them? If not, why? Why are those barriers? Why are you hitting those barriers? These outcomes should be, these results should be set at the start of your campaign. You need to set targets as well. I think this is the point that a lot of people think. Social media, it's obviously been around for a while, and people nowadays think it needs to be on Facebook, it needs to be on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest or whatever. At the start of a campaign, you need to start to think about how you're going to interact with your audiences. You don't need to be on everything. Just because another museum is, just because another theatre show is, another exhibition is, doesn't mean it's right for you. Your social media strategy, which hopefully you've all got one, if you're doing social media, it needs to interlink with your marketing strategy as well. It needs to work hand in hand. It's just an extension. It's not separate. You've still got the same outcomes. At the end of it, you still want visitors to the door and you still want ticket sales, for example. Whatever those outcomes are, they need to work together. An evaluation, some of you said you do evaluations already. It needs to be a bit more in depth than how many likes and comments you've had on a post, on a blog or something like that. it all relates around the content. Sometimes you might be creating content that doesn't deserve, when I say doesn't deserve, it doesn't require comments. There's no reason for people to comment on it. So setting comments as a measurement, there's no need for it. You need to look at reach. So for example, if you're sending out a tweet and somebody retweets your tweet, how many followers have they got? If their followers retweet it, how many people are you reaching with your overall message? So it's all about picking out who your key influencers as well. So with your brand or your organisation, have you got people that interact with your brand a lot? Now, I'm not on about those crazy stalker fans that we've all got on social medias that will like everything you put up, that share everything, that come up with some really weird stuff. We're on about those people that properly engage with it. And it's all about determining who those key influencers are and how you actually engage with them. How can you give them that added extra? So they're almost like an extension of your organisation. Can you give them, for example, if it's a particular blogger or a particular tweeter that really engages with your brand, can you give them that little something extra that, you know, gets them even more excited and wants to tell their friends even more? Who creates content? A couple of years ago, I worked on The Voyage with Birmingham Hippodrome. It was an outdoor dance spectacular, as they described it, in Victoria Square. Big open door event. They erected a 50-foot ship in Victoria Square. It featured live music, it featured dance, light show. It was absolutely amazing and one of my favourite campaigns to actually work on. From the back of that event, we had over 120 YouTube videos uploaded of that event. Now, at the start of the campaign, I didn't even think to look at people uploading their own content. This was a couple of years ago. I was more concerned in what we were doing. How many clicks was the blog getting? How many retweets were the tweets getting? I wasn't actually thinking about the type of content that people were creating themselves. And as we started looking deeper into that, the reach was just absolutely phenomenal. You've got people that are avid YouTubers that create their own content all the time, but also people that hadn't engaged with this type of performance before as well, hadn't created their own content, hadn't been to a show like this before. So it's always important to look at who creates the content as well. When you're putting on your events or your various exhibitions and things like that, can you identify those people beforehand? Have they created content, not for you, you've not asked them to do it, but have they created content off their own back before? And if so, can you engage them again with your new thing, your new exhibition or whatever? So again, giving them those little bit of those tidbits and that little extra something. Demographics of audience, always important to look at. There are plenty of tools out there, and I will talk about some tools later on in the presentation, about looking at identifying the demographics of your audience. You may think you want to target 21 to 35-year-olds with your exhibition, but it may be that actually it's 60 plus that are engaging with your exhibition. Why is that? And is that still a success because you've engaged with a completely different audience and not the one you've originally thought about? By identifying your demographics and evaluating the demographics, you can look at what tools and platforms they use. So for example, stereotyping here, but younger demographic is more likely to use Facebook, whereas an older demographic is more likely to use Twitter. So it kind of influences the type of content that you put out. Going back to sort of when I was talking about the social media strategy and the tools that you use to promote your items, it's not set in stone. Don't ever think, I've set up a Facebook, I've set up a Twitter, and that's all I can ever do. It's a fluid movement. That's what every time you evaluate your progress, you can tailor it. It may be after a couple of months that you don't need to, perhaps your blogs aren't getting the hits or the comments or anything like that. Do you need to keep not wasting your time, but do you need to be doing blogs? If people are engaging more via Twitter and Facebook, maybe you should concentrate your efforts on that as well. So it's all about limiting, I guess, your wastage as well and making the most of the time and the resources that you've got. Social media evaluations are no different to audience evaluations. They are a great extension, in fact. We've all done, especially when you're doing bids and things like that, and having to report back to funders and sponsors and things. Social media is a great way to evaluate your event, your experience. So don't be afraid to ask people what they thought. Again, you're probably going to get negative as well, but you kind of want those negative responses as well, so you can really start tailoring it for next time. Right, I realise you can't read that. I'm going to click through to the proper thing in a minute. Now, some of this presentation is about what is taken from what Jane Finnis was talking about earlier on. So Culture 24 have done a very, very, very good and extensive guide called Let's Get Real 2. There are links at the end of this presentation. I really recommend that you download this document. It's free, but you can make a donation. And it's a fantastic social media toolkit, in essence. It's more of a research project. So they're not telling you how to do things, they're telling you how other people have done things. They've actually spoken to museums, to art galleries, to touring theatre companies, things like that, and seen what they've done and built upon their success, what's worked and what hasn't worked. What it does, it picks out strategic themes to begin with. We look at community, the brand, marketing, communication, interaction, content and visitor services as well. So obviously the last column is depending on what type of organisation that you are. This is more museum based, so you've got that visitor services. So then it looks at how you evaluate each element of this framework. So, for example, your community, how do you measure the size of your community? It could be the number of fans, followers or subscribers. Then below, it's got what it suggests you should use. At the end of the document, there's a big list of all the different types and tools you can use, so you can just use this as a cross-reference. So for that element, it suggests that you use the social media analytics tools. Now, if we go to brand, you've then got number of mentions. So again, you can use the social media tools and search queries as well. Twitter's got its own search query. You can go onto Twitter, search box at the top, and you can click that and type through and look at all your feedback. There is a great free website called Storyfy as well. Storyfy is something that we'll use for Hello Culture at the end, and it's a great way of pulling content together at the end of a particular event. It pulls content from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it. It brings it all into one stream. So if you're looking for that final evaluation for whatever purpose, or whether you just want something to put on your website at the end of an event, it's a fantastic tool. It also gives you embedding code, so you can embed it into a blog. I've used it before, and again, like I said, it'll be used for this tomorrow. You can search particular hashtags or users for that.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
How far back can you look?
On Storyfy, you can look back, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's probably a couple of months. The reason why I use Storyfy is because hashtags on Twitter only last for around 2 weeks. Your tweets obviously last forever, but the hashtag doesn't. So if your tweet goes back further than 2 weeks, when you search your hashtag, you won't actually pick it up anymore. So Storyfy is a great way of pulling it all together. And again, you can embed it into your own blogs and things like that. Marketing communications. So if we look at message reach as well. So this, like I was talking about earlier on, is not just how many followers and things like that, and how many retweets you've got, but how many potential people you have been reached by that message. For example, Polaroids and Polar Bears, we do an article, say about Supersonic, for example, and then Supersonic retweets it, and then perhaps Home of Metal retweets it, and then maybe Brum Notes retweets it as well. So you've got those 3 or 4 retweets, but how many followers within those organisations, how many followers have those organisations and Twitter profiles got? So that message is going out. So you kind of need to bear in mind of that as well. So you may think, oh, I've only actually got 3 retweets, but how many people has that reached? So next, going on to content for your strategic themes. How do you measure the success of content? It could be traffic to websites or your blog. And again, through that, it could be through Google Analytics. How many of you use Google Analytics? How many of you understand Google Analytics? Right, Google Analytics, again, a fantastic tool. It's kind of got lots of different levels, and it's worth just spending time really investigating it. We all know, if you use Google Analytics, you all know, hopefully you all know the basics. So how many people visit your website, how many clicks you get, what's your most popular page, and how long they're spending on there. But Google Analytics offers a lot more extensive analytics as well. You can actually map out the journey of a visitor of your website, and you can see where they're going on your website, and it's all in real time as well, so you can see actually how they're doing it and how long they're spending. It's really worth doing this because you can sort of map out where people are dropping off on your website, and then you can look at why they're dropping off. Are they dropping off because to get to, for example, a ticket page, they've got to go through 20 other pages? People will get bored from that. So then you can sort of like shrink down the journey. You can also look at end goals as well, so mapping out what's your end goal, what do you want people to do on your website. Again, if it's something like tickets, you can map out that particular journey, making it as easy as possible. People don't want to get to, for example, purchasing tickets, people don't want to look through 20 pages of your website. You may want them to see as much content as they as possibly can, but they'll do that in their own time. If they're there just to purchase tickets, that's probably all they want to do. They may get sidetracked and see something else that's of interest, but their main objective is probably to buy tickets. So it's making sure that process is as quick and easy as possible. Looking at visitor services, again, this may not be applicable to all of you. Which one shall we pick? Satisfaction, for example. A survey. Again, we've all done those printed off surveys at the end of an event. Why not try something digital as well? You can use things like SurveyMonkey. You can get a link, you can share it via Twitter and Facebook, and send it out via email as well. So this document is amazing. I really can't rate this highly enough of what Culture24 and Jane have done. It's really in depth into sort of how you should set up that framework. And although it kind of looks really, really scary, once you get into the process and in the mindset of thinking you need to evaluate things, then it does become second nature. We work for doing some work with the RBSA at the moment. We do work with Grain Photography Hub at the Library of Birmingham, and things like that. We always do an evaluation at the end of the month. That's what they like. They like an end of the month evaluation. Perhaps that may be too much for you. Perhaps you prefer just to do it at the end of a campaign or the end of an event. But it's worth, if you are going to do that, it's worth just checking in every so often, just to see how your content is working as well. Next, I want to talk about the process for, I guess, setting up your social media framework, your evaluation process, but perhaps any campaign as well. So if you're going to be using social media, not necessarily social media, but perhaps blogs and other elements as well, the first thing you want to do is define your objectives. Now, you're probably going to have two sets of objectives. You're going to have those for your actual event, exhibition, whatever you want to call it, which could be visitors, it could be ticket sales, whatever. But you also perhaps want to set objectives for your social media as well. Don't set them ridiculously high that you're never going to achieve them. Make them achievable, but kind of, have a little bit of aspiration in it as well. So, how many Facebook likes do you want? How many new followers? How many retweets do you want? Again, this will become sort of second nature as you kind of do this more and more often. It just takes practice. Next, you want to select your performance indicators. So, once you've got your objectives, your performance indicators are, in essence, those, how many likes, what does success look like? You then need to set up your tools. So your tools could be HootSuite, they could be TweetDeck, they could be Google Analytics. Get it all done at the start of your campaign, rather than thinking right at the end, oh my God, I need to set up my reports or my social media channels. Collect and analyze. A lot of the tools that I'll give you some links for in a bit are automated. So once you set it up originally, setting up your hashtags, setting up your websites and things like that into these programs, it will actually send you a report automatically, and you can set that interval as well. It could be every week, every month, if you wanted it every day. Probably wouldn't advise that because you're probably going to get bombarded with stats and figures. But yeah, so just make sure you collect all that information across your different platforms. And then report your results. Talk to people about it. Why not talk to other organisations? See what's worked for them and what hasn't worked. I think quite a few people today have talked about collaboration. There's no reason that you can't talk about this with other people. Find out what's worked for them, what hasn't worked. It may not work for you, what they've done, but it's good to see what other people are doing and using as well. An example of that process, you have your objective on the left-hand side. So if we take an objective, increase the size of your community on Facebook, you can attach a figure to that if you want, but you may not want to. Your performance indicator, how do you measure that? It's the total number of likes or the percentage of increase compared to previous periods. So what I think some people forget to do is actually to compare it. So it's all very well doing an evaluation every month, for example, but what you're comparing it to, compare it to the other month, compare it to another event, just make sure you compare it to something. How can you see your journey of success? You're all going to succeed at this if you're not comparing it to anything else. Tools and methods, Facebook Insights, for example. Facebook Insights is the built-in tool on Facebook. Anybody use Facebook Insights at the moment? Brilliant. So that's free. It's free to use, and it does provide some pretty decent, maybe perhaps basic, but pretty decent stats. Next objective, generate interaction of users with content posted on Facebook. So it's all very well that you're posting amazing photos, amazing videos, amazing blog posts, but people need to interact with it. What does that interaction, again, look like? Are you looking for the number, loads of likes on a particular post? Are you looking for retweets? It may be that whatever you're posting may not need interaction. It may not require anything. But to work out your interaction rate, it's comments, this is if it's on Facebook, it's comments plus likes plus shares. So basically anything anybody does to one of your posts, divided by your reached users. Your Facebook Insights will give you your reached users. Is it making sense so far? Cool. Next objective, drive traffic to the website. So performance indicator, number of visits to the website, number of page views, and most shared URLs. It's always quite interesting to see what your most shared posts and pages are on a website. I won't say which mine are, but when I started my website, there's certain pages and articles that I thought I would get a lot more shares on, a lot more interest in, because they were perhaps bigger names, for example. And I thought, these are the big brands, this is what's going to get me loads of clicks and stuff like that. And they don't. But actually, the smaller things I write about gets a lot more. So that's actually affected the type of content that I write for my website now. If you kind of look back, you can kind of see how the organisations and the events that I write about have sort of shifted. So you can probably work out who I don't blog about anymore, because people aren't interested in it. Hopefully that's because of the brand and not because of my writing. But it's always interesting to see what people actually think. I can't remember who was on about it earlier on. I don't know whether it was Jane or somebody else was saying about getting people who aren't in your circle to give you feedback, people who aren't involved in your project to look at your content and give you feedback. It may be friends, for example. I wouldn't put it out on Twitter going, what do you think of our latest article or anything like that. But perhaps people who don't work in your organisation, ask them what they think. It won't be, true results or true figures, because they may still give you that little bit of biased results. But it's always interesting to take that outsider's view on things. So for the tools and methods, you've got Google Analytics. Last objective, encourage users to comment their cultural experience on Twitter. So this, in essence, is talking about how much they loved your event or loved your experience or exhibition. And that the performance indicator for that could be the number of tweets that use the hashtag, or the influencers as well. One of the apps you can use is something called Topsy, and that I think it's free, but I think there is a paid for mechanism in there as well if you want the more in-depth stuff. It brings out your influencers in that. So when you're doing your evaluation, you have got your basic sort of things to analyse. You've got your increase of likes, because hopefully it's all going to increase, increasing followers, and then you've got number of retweets, mentions and shares. Obviously this is very biased towards Facebook and Twitter, but that could go on for ages if I cover all the social media platforms. Obviously you've got things like Instagram, how many likes, which are obviously the little hearts, and how many shares and things like that. And then you've got Pinterest and everything else. What type of post works best? Is it a news update? Is it a photo / video? Or is it a competition? Again, this is something that I'm still developing on my site and still trying to work out what works best. I changed earlier on in the year. I'll show you my site in a minute if you're not too familiar with it. About a month, well, what was it, a couple of months ago I rebranded the website. So I launched a whole new website which made it a lot more visual. Since making it a lot more visual, we've had a lot more engagement, which is great. There's still lots of text, there's still the same amount of text, but there's more imagery and there's more videos. Some of the videos I've got on my YouTube channel, there's one I uploaded last August, has now had over 7,000 views. No idea where they've come from, because I still need to analyse it. But yeah, I was completely shocked at how I'd not checked it for a while and how the views had gone up massively. So it's worth keeping an eye on what content works best. You may think it's easier to write a blog post than do a video, but perhaps if your video works better, maybe invest in ways to do video content. You don't need a camera, like a big massive camera, like the lovely guys at Rebel and Cut are broadcasting from today. You could do it on your iPhone, or you could just get a cheap digital camera or something like that. It doesn't need to be amazing high HD quality. Competitions as well. I think sometimes people always think that competitions will always lead to loads of likes and loads of shares. When I was writing this presentation, I spoke to a couple of organisations, again a couple of the I thought were really big organisations, and asked them about their competitions, and they were quite sheepish when I asked them about their competitions. And these are organisations that have got hundreds and thousands of followers and likes on their various social media platforms. And I asked them about their interaction with competitions, and some of them only get 2 entries for the competitions. And I was horrified and shocked. How can an organisation with 200,000 followers on Twitter get 2 entries for a competition? Either the prize isn't good enough, or people just aren't interested in prizes from that particular brand. So it's worth just keeping a note of what content works best. Compare month on month. Again, like I've already said, keep a log. All the evaluation tools that I've talked about, you can usually save them in PDF format or Word documents, print them out, set up a folder on your desktop, but also keep a hard copy as well, just so you can flick back and see how you've all grown in social media. Monitor the growth and decline of your social media platforms. There may be, so these 2 points are kind of linked, there may be months where you get more engagement than others. It could be that you're doing more interesting things, or it could be that, for example, your content during the summer months, so for example August, don't get as many clicks or likes. It could be because people are away on holiday, for example. So it's things like that. People don't necessarily think about those sort of factors. I mean, I know we all take our phones away when we go on holiday abroad and stuff like that, but a lot of us probably don't check Facebook and Twitter and whatever unless we're on free Wi-Fi, because it's going to cost an absolute fortune. So it's kind of good to see what time of year, time of month, and actually time of the day work best. So with some of the companies and organisations that we work with, we shake it up. Everyone, it's all right? We actually shake it up every month. Well, not every month, every week, about when we send out updates. We find that at the moment, 8 o'clock in the morning works really well, because you're hitting those people who go to work, or they could be on the train, they could be on the bus. Lunchtime works quite well. And then actually evenings around 6 or 7 o'clock, so you're catching the people who are going home as well. Don't be afraid to share your content a couple of times as well. You should be proud of your content, whatever you create, whether it's a blog post, upload a photo. So share it a couple of times. I don't mean perhaps not on the same day, because people will probably get sick of it if you're sharing the same blog post 3 or 4 times the same day. But why not share it a couple of times in a week or over the course of a month, as long as it's still sort of relevant. There's no point posting a blog post a month later when your event happened. HootSuite. I said I hate HootSuite. As much as I hate it, it is a very good tool if you've got limited budgets. The basic package is completely free. It does quite an extensive evaluation that you can run. You literally set it up and it runs it for you. You just put your key terms and things in. The reason why I don't like it is because we manage quite a few different social media accounts. So when you're monitoring 10, 15 social media accounts at the same time, looking at it for that long, it kind of makes your eyes bleed a little bit. But if you're managing 1 or 2 accounts, it works quite well. Also, as well as the evaluation, it obviously lets you update your social media channels as well. It lets you schedule everything so you can set the times. Yes, it's sort of like the full package. I could spend a whole session talking about how to use it, but there are YouTube videos on the HootSuite website which show you how to update everything. So a lot of these programs, they do free webinars and they do free YouTube channels. YouTube is amazing. You can find anything on YouTube. So some of these websites, I may not be able to talk to you about how you use them. If you go on the websites, and I'm sure if you go into Google as well and Google them, there are tutorials, free tutorials that you can just watch, and it's worth doing. I know Amanda sat through an hour and a half yesterday of webinars on Sprout Social, and she came back and said she loves it, which is great. It just meant, it kind of you can do it in your spare time, stick it on in the background. It's just worth giving a listen to the tutorials. Sprout Social. Now there is a free trial. The paid for package, it's very, very cheap, very, very, very cheap, but it is a monthly fee. The more social media accounts that you add on to it, the more expensive it becomes. So for a lot of you, it's probably going to be hopefully pittance in terms of the evaluation. But if something's depending on your evaluation, it's worth doing. It's unlike HootSuite, which kind of is more basic. HootSuite, the basic package, looks at how many likes and how many followers and how many times people have hashtagged you. Sprout Social is more based on engagement. It looks at that reach, how many people you've reached. It even looks at the sex and age group of people as well, which is really, really useful. And if you really want to go one step further, it looks at the sentiment. So sentiment is all about how people are talking about your brand or your organisation. Is it positive? Is it negative? Are they saying nice things? Are they saying bad things? It looks for keywords and it tells you how, what tone of voice people are talking to you in. Also, it's great for customer services. So if you're an organisation that has to deal with complaints, there's a couple of companies that organisations we've worked with, there has been a customer service element, and we used to get quite a few complaints. Nothing to do with our work, but it was to do with the actual brand. It allows you to flag these issues, and you can assign them to different people and deal with them at a later time or instantly. Google Analytics, again, it's, without scaring anyone, it's a beast of a program. It's free. There is an enterprise program as well, which I'd probably say none of you need. And this is like for multi-billion organisations that get millions and millions and millions of people visiting the website every day. So it is free. Again, I would do the online tutorials. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do the basic things, how to set targets, how to do your reports and everything like that. So it's worth just watching these videos. You can link it with your social media accounts, so you can look at how, what's leading people to your website. Is it through Facebook? Is it through Twitter? What links work best? And as I said earlier on, it enables you to plan an audience path as well, tracking their journey across the website. So this website, I'd write down. I think these presentations will be made available afterwards anyway. That has it's a 2-page document with the list of all the websites. Not just the ones I've talked about today, but all the ones that Culture24 have put in their document. So these are websites that a lot of museums and art galleries use, and they look at all the different metrics. So it's worth checking out that document. I could list them all here, but you'd probably be here for the next day. We're trying to write them all down. So I'd write down that link and then look at all those as well. Tweet reach. Tweet reach has 2 elements. It's free and it's paid for. There's a free part which lets you backtrack your last 50 tweets and the reach of those last 50 tweets. Then there is a paid element as well which lets you look further. YouTube, use YouTube. If you're stuck, I guarantee there will be a YouTube video available.